Shalom. We are in Torah portion Vayelech. It means and he stand. No, it's not and he stand. And he went. That's it. Moses went and spoke for the last time to Israel. This is Deuteronomy chapter 31. Now this parasha is always between Yom Teruah and Yom Kippur. Now we all know what that means from a prophetic perspective. Yom Teruah is also known as Rosh Hashanah, the head of the year. It's the civil new year. It's not the biblical new year, but it is a cycle that ends within the 7th month. And the number 7 is very prominent. So we are going to start the beginning of the 7th biblical month this Wednesday evening, the 8th, which is tomorrow night, where you will see the sliver. And that is the starting of the feast cycle, which are known as the 4 festivals, which end in Sukkot or Tabernacles. And the last day of Sukkot is called the Great Day, or the 8th day, which basically depict the new beginning or the first day of the next cycle from a prophetic perspective. So what we see from this is still underpinning and supporting our time frame and what we discussed in the previous Torah portions, where we are within the 6th millennium, then it ends with a war. Then we cross over, and that happens during the Jordan, crossing into the Jordan. Then you step into the 7th millennium, that ends with another war, and then you step into the 8th millennium. So what we see is that Yom Teruah is basically announcing the starting point of the tribulation, or it can be the starting point of the 7th millennium. I think both are applicable. And then you get the starting point of the 8th millennium that phase out with Sukkot. Now Sukkot is mentioned in Zechariah 14. So everything preceding to, and they will go up year after year to celebrate the Feast of Sukkot. Everything preceding that is what is happening during the 7th millennium, specifically towards the end. And that gives us our prophetic time frame within the passages, as well within the Moedim timeline and sequential stages. Now, what's interesting about this parasha, it specifically mentioned Moses' age, which is 120. Now, what's interesting about the number 20, it is made up of 1 times 2 times 3 times 4 times 5, I think. Yes. And every one of those numbers has a specific meaning. Number 5 means grace. Number 4 means the work of Mashiach. Number 3 means covenant. Number 2 means the restoration of relationships. And number 1 means echad. Now, if you read it from that perspective, from back to front, you see that Yahweh extended grace through the work of Mashiach and his covenant to restore relationships between him and man, so that they can become echad with him. That's the meaning of 120 from the meanings of the mathematics that make up the number 120. And on top of that, the gematria of 120 has the word thorn in it, which is the word sin, samach yod nun. And sin is the base word for Sinai, that means Sinai, or Mount Thorn. And that is also connected to the thorn of the thorn bush. Now the thorn bush has the symbolism of burning and not being consumed. Now in a previous study I did mention that that was a representation of Moses. One level of interpretation is that's the anointing upon him. The other interpretation is that's the cleansing process that he went through without being consumed. And for him being able to stand in the presence of Yahweh, he had to go through a cleansing process, which was a wilderness experience. And that fire that he went through allowed him to stand in face to face before Yahweh in his presence, which was represented first by the thorn bush and then by Mount Thorn, or the fire upon the mountain. Everything to do with fire. So what we are going into, and that's also one of the gematria of 120, is the word fire. It's the cleansing process of fire and also the cleansing process of water. Now, if you think back of the context of the River Jordan, where else did we have a crossing over water that the water opened up? It was the Red Sea. So the Red Sea, from a prophetic perspective, the one is where you leave Egypt and you cross over, then you step into the wilderness. And at the end of the wilderness, you cross over and you step into the promised land. So it's a mikvah, or a transition process, where you die, and that concept of death is you become less and he becomes more. That's a purification process. So the first purification is the baptism of water. That's the Red Sea. The second purification is the baptism by fire. That's depicted by the River Jordan. Now, Yeshua said you cannot enter the kingdom unless you are baptized in water and in fire. Now, the first one is where you make the decision to cross over and leave Egypt. That is when you come to faith. The second crossing through fire is not by choice. It's like being pregnant and giving birth. It's depending on the time, the appointed time when the baby needs to be born, where the water will break, and then the great birth, which is also the process of the cleansing of the leper, which we saw last time. The leader, can't remember his name, had to wash himself 7 times, dip himself 7 times in the Jordan. That's the 7 cycles of 7 that's referred to in the book of Revelation, that depicts the Great Tribulation, or the Jordan crossing. And that is ending with fire, hail and fire falling from heaven, earthquakes. And that's the cleansing of fire. So that River Jordan represents the mikvah of fire that has to do with the timing and the decision on when Mashiach is to come. That's depicted by Yahweh himself. He decided that. Now you have the first decision of crossing over. He makes the second decision, and no one can escape this. They have to go through fire. Now that corresponds, I think it's in Luke, that says that everyone will be tested through fire. All their works, that's through stubble and wood, will be consumed, but you will be saved as through fire. So that's the fire baptism of the Jordan that will test your faith to the maximum. And the little bit that's left after everything else is burned, that is what will enter the promised land. And that is the thorn bush, which is a very small bush, which was left after Moses went through the cleansing process. And you will have a thorn bush experience, but you will be holy, a man of fire, a man and a woman on fire, being cleansed, and you'll be able to stand before the ultimate consuming fire that is Yahweh. So that's just a few side notes there. The other thing that I just want to underline, which I'll probably tap into tomorrow when I find some more information about it, is the word Orion. That's also found in the gematria of 120. Now in Job 9 verse 9, it not only mentions Orion, it mentions Pleiades. It also mentions Arcturus, which is the great bear, and the little bear, also known as the great dipper. And that constellation is linked to Pleiades, the northern star. And if you read Job 9 verse 9, it talks about the north, which is Arcturus, linked to the northern star. Then it mentions Orion, the Orion belt, which I think is a gateway or a connection point, which is the 3 stars, which links to the covenant. And then you get the 7 stars, which is Pleiades, which reveals the 7 stars in the hand of Mashiach. And then in that same verse, it mentions thereafter the south. So we get the 2 opposing forces, the north versus the south. And within those 3 constellations, we see the prophetic play out of the 2 realms meeting. And where they meet is within Orion. That's the center of the meeting place. And the 7 stars are basically also the 7 churches, the 7 lampstands, and specifically the 7th star, or the seventh church, which is the one you can't really see with the naked eye. It's very, very lightly producing light in the night sky, and you can clearly see the 5 stars. Then you see the 6th one a bit dimmer, and then the 7th one is very dim. And that basically just show you how they grew cold, how the Church of Laodicea grew cold. You're neither hot or cold. You lost your fire. There's a bit of a dimming light still shining, but he will come and rescue his people from amongst the bondage within the 7th church, prior to the 7th millennium, during the Moedim of the 7th month, starting with Yom Teruah, the first feast of the 3 within the 4 festivals, and the 3 cycles of 7, which are the cycles of judgment, the baptism of fire that's revealed in the book of Revelation. So I just want to leave you with that, just give you an overall picture of the prophetic, and then also what it means within our time frame and where we think we will be. Alright, so I'll leave you with that. I hope you have a good day and be blessed. Shalom.